You've entered void of rules, where chaos reigns and darkness consumes all. In this twisted realm where all laws have crumbled, only one rule remains, and those who break it are cast into eternal digital oblivion. The rule is simple: subscribe. We're almost at 6,000 corrupted souls, but the void hungers for more. Our goal is 10,000 subscribers before this year bleeds into darkness. Will you join our legion or face the consequences of defying the void? Now let's dive into today's story. The candles in La Cripta del Silenzio have been burning for 300 years, but tonight they flicker differently. Father Torretti notices everything after 9 decades of reading omens in wax and shadow, and the way the flames dance tells him that somewhere in the world, something ancient has awakened. My name is Father Elias Morvant. In exactly 3 hours, I will become the only man to walk out of Abbazia di Valle Oscura alive. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 5 years ago, I was Professor Elias Morvant, teaching medieval history at Tulane University, and coming home to Marie's laugh echoing through our shotgun house and Sophie's muddy shoes by the door. Marie collected Louisiana folklore the way some people collect stamps, chasing down every ghost story and unexplained disappearance from the bayous to the French Quarter. Sophie wanted to be a paleontologist because dinosaurs, she insisted with 7-year-old logic, were more honest than people. When they were dead, they stayed dead. The drunk driver who killed them on October 13th never even hit the brakes. I found God in that hospital room, but not the God I'd expected. The God I found was the one who let a 7-year-old die while keeping her daddy's heart beating for no reason anyone could explain. The God who answered my desperate prayers with silence and the smell of disinfectant, and the sound of machines marking time until hope finally flatlined. The priesthood found me 8 months later, hollow and searching. The Vatican's Extermination unit found me when I exorcised a possessed graduate student, using nothing but funeral rage and Latin I'd half forgotten from seminary courses I'd audited for research. Grief makes the strongest weapons, Cardinal Torretti had said, watching me sign papers that would erase Professor Morvant forever, the broken pieces cut deepest. Now I sit 3 stories beneath St. Peter's Basilica, in a chamber carved from stone that remembers the fall of Rome. The walls are covered in frescoes older than most countries, angels with flaming swords locked in eternal combat with things that were ancient when Christ was born. Each painting tells the same story: light holding back darkness, order containing chaos, faith standing guard over the dreams of those who sleep safely because others are willing to pay the price of their protection. The heavy oak door opens with a groan that could wake the dead. Brother Lucien Saint Croix enters first, 6 feet of concentrated violence wrapped in brown robes that don't fool anyone who's seen him work. Before God claimed him, Lucien was the kind of private contractor who operated in places governments pretended didn't exist. Whatever he did in Afghanistan haunts him twice a month, screaming him awake with visions that smell like burning and taste like guilt. "Morning, Father," he says, settling onto stone, worn smooth by centuries of the faithful, ready for another glorious day in service to the Almighty. The sarcasm in his voice is armor, protecting something that might once have been innocence. Father Matteo Orsini follows, clutching his leather satchel like it contains the secrets of heaven. Where Lucien radiates cynical competence, Matteo burns with faith so pure it's almost blinding. He's memorized every recorded exorcism since the church began keeping records, can recite binding prayers in 19 languages, and hasn't stopped trembling since Prague 3 months ago, when we learned that some hungers grow stronger when fed. "The Cardinal is waiting," he says, his Italian accent turning simple words into music. He says this one is different. Sister Callista brings up the rear, her medical bag creating a familiar rhythm against her hip. She came to us from Sao Paulo, where she'd run a field hospital until she learned that sometimes the monsters are real, and they don't need bullets to kill. Her faith is quieter than Matteo's, but deeper, forged in emergency rooms where prayers compete with sirens, and children die despite everything medicine can do. Cardinal Torretti waits at the stone table that serves as our briefing room, 93 years old and sharp as Vatican steel. His hands never stop moving, as if he's perpetually blessing something or warding something else away. Before him lies a sealed envelope that looks like it contains our collective death warrant. Abbazia di Valle Oscura, he says without preamble, sliding a photograph across ancient stone. The image shows a monastery carved into a cliff face, all Gothic spires and flying buttresses that make it look less like a house of worship, and more like a prison built to contain something that should never see daylight. 3 villagers dead, 2 missing. The local priest was found hanging, inverted from the bell tower, carved with symbols that predate Christ by several millennia. His winter blue eyes fix on each of us in turn. This is not Prague. This is not like anything you've faced before. He produces a piece of parchment that looks older than original sin. Its edges brown with age and something that might be blood. The rules of life. They are not suggestions. They are not theological guidelines. They are the accumulated wisdom of every Vatican soldier who entered that place and lived long enough to write down what they learned. I take the parchment carefully, feeling centuries of desperate knowledge in its fibres. The Latin is clear despite its age, written in a hand that shook with exhaustion or terror. I translate aloud. Rule 1. Never speak the name of the entity while inside the abbey. Names have power over the named, but some names have power over the speaker. Rule 2. Do not pray aloud in the lower catacombs. Your faith will call it like blood calls sharks, and it has been hungry for so very long. Rule 3. If you hear chanting that you did not begin, cover your ears and retreat immediately. It speaks with the voices of the faithful, to gather new voices for its choir. Rule 4. Do not touch the Black Madonna statue after sunset. She weeps for the souls it has claimed, and her tears burn the living like acid. Rule 5. If a team member begins reciting scripture without prompting, restrain them with blessed silver immediately. It speaks through willing vessels, turning their devotion into invitation. Rule 6. Leave before dawn on the 3rd day. Stay longer, and the mountain itself will ensure you never leave at all. The silence that follows feels heavy as tombstone. In the distance, something drips with the patient rhythm of a funeral dirge. Who wrote these? I ask, though part of me already knows the answer will be worse than ignorance. Father Alessandro Torriani, 1847, sole survivor of the last official Vatican expedition. He lived long enough to deliver his report before taking his own life, rather than risk carrying what he'd seen back into the world. Matteo's grip tightens on his satchel, and what exactly did he see? Cardinal Torretti's smile contains no warmth, no comfort, no hope of easy answers. Something that was worshipped before Rome existed, chained beneath that mountain by forces that understood the difference between destroying evil and containing it. Something that has spent 2,000 years learning human nature from every priest we've sacrificed to keep it bound. He stands with the careful movements of a man whose bones remember decades of Vatican service. Your equipment is loaded. You have 72 hours to assess the situation, and, if possible, renew the containment. Remember, some evils cannot be killed, only fed just enough to keep them satisfied, but not enough to make them strong. As we file toward the door, his final words follow us like a benediction. The Church does not send you to win, my children. The Church sends you to hold the line. Sometimes that is victory enough. The drive through the Apennine Mountains carries us away from the 21st century and back toward an older world, where humans knew their place in the food chain. Ancient Roman stones push through crumbling asphalt like the bones of giants, and forests press close enough to the road that branches scrape our windows with sounds that could be wind or could be something else entirely. I drive while the others rest, or try to. In the rearview mirror, I watch Matteo's lips move in silent prayer, while Lucienne stares out the window with the 1,000-yard stare of a soldier remembering wars. Callista checks and rechecks her medical supplies, though we all know that if something goes wrong at the Abbey, bandages won't be much help. "Tell me about your family," she says suddenly, breaking the heavy silence that settled over us like fog. It's the first time anyone's asked directly. The Vatican keeps detailed files, but there's a difference between reading someone's tragedy and hearing them live it. Marie was a librarian who specialized in folklore and mythology, I say, surprised by how easily the words come after 5 years of careful silence. She used to joke that she married me because I was the only historian boring enough to make her research seem exciting. Sophie was 7, wanted to be a paleontologist because dinosaurs, in her infinite wisdom, had the good sense to stay dead when they were supposed to. The irony tastes like copper and regret. They would have loved this, I continue, gesturing at the landscape rolling past our windows. Mountains that remember Caesar's legions and forests that hide Roman ruins like secrets. Marie always said that legends exist because something real inspired them. The details get twisted over generations, embellished or minimized depending on who's telling the story, but the truth never completely disappears. "And now you hunt the things that inspire the legends," Lucienne observes without turning from the window. "Now I hunt the thing that took them from me." The words carry more venom than 3 years of Vatican training should allow, but some wounds never heal properly. Matteo turns from his navigation duties. "Revenge is not faith, my friend." "Maybe not, but it's what gets me out of bed in the morning." The village of Valle Oscura clings to the mountainside like a collection of frightened animals, huddling together for warmth. Every window is shuttered despite the afternoon sun. Every door bears protective symbols that span religions and centuries. Crucifixes beside pagan wards, Islamic prayers next to Jewish mezuzahs, as if the locals have decided that when facing ancient evil, theological differences become luxuries they can't afford. The few villagers we glimpse cross themselves and disappear into buildings that look like they haven't changed since the Roman Empire. An old woman emerges from what might be the village's only shop, her black dress and headscarf making her look like a figure from medieval woodcuts. She approaches our van slowly, muttering prayers in rapid Italian that include words I don't recognize from any modern dialect. When she reaches my window, she presses something into my palm, a small wooden cross carved from local olive wood, worn smooth by decades of desperate fingers. "Il diavolo si è svegliato," she whispers. "The devil has awakened." "We know," I reply in my rusty Italian. Her grip tightens on my hand. "Allora Dio vi benedica, perché nessun altro può farlo." "Then God bless you because no one else can." She's gone before I can respond, vanishing into a shop like smoke. The road to the Abbey is barely wide enough for our van, switchbacking up through stands of beech and oak that lean inward to create a tunnel of branches. Our engine whines in protest as we climb toward the structure that dominates the cliff face above us like a stone tumor growing from the mountain's flesh. Abbazia di Valle Oscura was built directly into the living rock, its Gothic spires and flying buttresses making it look less like a monastery and more like a fortress designed to keep something imprisoned. The bell tower stands broken against grey clouds, its upper levels deliberately demolished centuries ago. Windows stare down at us like empty eye sockets, and I count architectural styles from at least 5 different periods, suggesting the abbey has been destroyed and rebuilt multiple times. Welcoming, Lucia mutters as we park in what was once a courtyard. Weeds push through cracked stones in patterns that almost look intentional, and a dry fountain squats in the centre, its cherub statue headless and stained with rust that might not be rust. The main doors are massive oak planks bound with iron, easily 12 feet tall and covered in carvings that time has worn into abstract shapes. They swing open at our touch with a groan that echoes off the mountains, revealing a nave that feels less like a church and more like the throat of some vast predator. Everything sacred has been systematically desecrated. Frescoes line the walls, but every human face in every painting has been chiseled away with surgical precision, leaving blank spaces where saints and angels should be. Crucifixes hang inverted from iron chains that show no rust, despite their obvious age. The altar at the far end has been split down the middle by tremendous force, its halves leaning away from each other like broken teeth. Someone spent a lot of time on this, Matteo observes, consulting notes from his satchel. This wasn't random vandalism. Every religious symbol has been inverted or destroyed while leaving the architecture intact. That suggests intelligence, planning, and most importantly, purpose. We establish base camp in what was once the refectory, arranging our equipment in defensive patterns that have become second nature. Holy water in plastic bottles that look absurdly modern in this ancient place. Silver crucifixes that catch what little light filters through broken windows. Leather-bound prayer books whose pages are marked with decades of desperate use. Callista's medical supplies, though we all know she's more likely to be performing last rites than first aid. From his satchel, Matteo produces his most precious possession, a reliquary containing what 3 separate Vatican historians have authenticated as a splinter from the true cross. The fragment of wood inside the crystal case is no bigger than a splinter, dark with age, but it seems to generate its own warmth in the abbey's unnatural cold. If prayer fails us, he says with reverent certainty, perhaps the wood that held our Saviour will remember its purpose. As sunset paints the mountains red, the temperature inside the abbey drops 20 degrees in 20 minutes. Our breath begins to mist, and from somewhere deep beneath our feet comes a sound like massive chains being dragged across stone, slow, deliberate, patient as geological time. The abbey's history is complex, Matteo explains, settling into his role as expedition scholar. Originally built in 1127 over Roman ruins, which themselves were constructed atop something far older, the Romans called the original deity Umbra, Mortis, the shadow of death. Archaeological evidence suggests it was worshipped here for over a millennium, before Roman legions arrived and tried to chain what they couldn't destroy. At exactly 11:47 by my watch, we hear them. The bells, dong, 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 deep and resonant, each toll seeming to rise from the mountain itself, rather than any mechanical source. But we've all examined the bell tower. It's been empty for centuries, its bronze bells melted down for cannons during some forgotten war. The sound reverberates through stone corridors with unnatural persistence, each echo lasting longer than physics should allow. And underneath the tolling, just at the edge of hearing, comes something that might be singing. Callista's rosary beads click faster as her fingers work through familiar prayers. Rule 3, she whispers, we didn't begin this. The bells continue for exactly 13 tolls, then stop with finality that seems to suck sound from the air itself. In the profound silence that follows, we hear footsteps, measured, deliberate, unhurried as death itself. They approach our refectory, pause just outside the doorway for a long moment that stretches like eternity, then retreat into darkness with the same unhurried pace. None of us sleep that first night. We take watches in pairs, but the abbey watches us in return, and every shadow could hide something that remembers when humans were prey. Dawn brings no relief, only a different quality of darkness. Sunlight struggles to penetrate the abbey's walls, creating a perpetual twilight that seems to swallow our flashlight beams after just a few meters. We split up to investigate, maintaining radio contact and following protocols written in the blood of previous teams. Lucienne and I take the upper levels while Callista and Matteo examine the sanctuary. In what was once the abbot's study, we discover a collection of journals spanning centuries, their leather covers cracked, but their pages preserved by something in the abbey's atmosphere that prevents normal decay. The entries chronicle the monastery's slow descent into damnation. The 15th of October, year of our Lord, 1634. The chanting from the deep places grows louder each night. Brother Francis speaks in his sleep now, reciting prayers in languages that predate Christ. Father Benedetto fears we are losing him to whatever dwells beneath our foundations, but Francis claims he has never been closer to God. The 3rd of December, 1634. We sealed the lower passages with blessed mortar and holy water, reinforcing them with iron crosses melted down from our chapel. The barriers lasted exactly 3 days before something broke through from below. The sounds it makes when the stones give way, forgive me, Lord, but they are beautiful beyond description. The 20th of February, 1635. 7 brothers have joined the chorus now. They descend at sunset and return before dawn, their eyes reflecting candlelight like beasts. When asked what they see in the depths, they speak of wonders beyond scripture, of truths that make the gospel seem like children's stories. The final entry is written in different handwriting, steadier but somehow more terrifying for its calm certainty. The 1st of March, 1635. The choice has been made. The binding requires renewal, and renewal requires sacrifice. Some of us will descend and not return, feeding what cannot be destroyed so that it might sleep for another generation. May God forgive what we do in his name, and may our souls find peace in the service we render to a world that will never know the price of its salvation. Meanwhile, in the sanctuary, Callista and Matteo make a discovery that stops them both cold. Hidden behind the destroyed altarpiece stands a statue unlike anything in traditional Christian iconography. Carved from stone so black it seems to absorb light, it depicts a woman in the pose of the Madonna. But this version predates Christianity by millennia. Her face combines maternal love with something wild and primal, and her hands rest protectively over a visibly pregnant belly. Dark stains run from her stone eyes like tears, pooling on the altar beneath her feet in patterns that almost resemble writing. The Black Madonna, Matteo breathes, his academic excitement overriding 3 years of hard-won caution. She's magnificent, pre-Christian but adapted for Catholic worship. The locals must have honoured the same divine feminine principle we call Mary, just older, more honest about what motherhood really means. Rule 4, Callista warns, backing away from the statue. Don't touch her after sunset. But Matteo is already approaching, drawn by a combination of scholarly curiosity and something deeper. She's not evil, he insists. Look at her expression. That's protective love, maternal instinct. She's trying to warn us about something. She's trying to help. That afternoon, while documenting architectural inconsistencies in the courtyard, Lucienne makes the mistake that transforms everything. We're examining how the stonework shows evidence of multiple reconstruction periods when Matteo makes another reference to the entity and the presence in the depths. Lucienne's patience, already strained by a sleepless night and too many unexplained sounds, finally snaps. For Christ's sake, just say its goddamn name. Umbra Mortis, there, I said it. Where's your ancient fucking evil now? The words echo off stone walls with resonance that seems to come from the mountain itself. The name hangs in the air like a physical thing, each syllable carrying weight that presses against our eardrums and makes our teeth ache. For one perfect moment, absolute silence falls over the abbey. even the wind stops, leaving us standing in a pocket of unnatural quiet that feels like the pause between lightning and thunder. Then, from somewhere impossibly far below, comes an answering whisper, the same words spoken in Lucien's exact voice, with his exact accent and inflection, Umbra Mortis. But the voice that speaks his words carries undertones that no human throat could produce, harmonics that suggest vast spaces and patient hunger, and something that has been waiting in darkness for longer than recorded history. The echo continues for far too long, bouncing off walls in directions that don't match the abbey's architecture. And underneath it, barely audible but unmistakably present, comes something that might be laughter. That night, reality begins to unravel. Lucien writhes in his sleeping bag, speaking words that make my soul recoil. But he's not using French or English. It's Latin, perfect ecclesiastical Latin, pronounced with an accent that predates the Vatican by centuries. Pater noster, qui es in infernis, sanctificatur nomen tuum. It's the Lord's Prayer, but inverted, each familiar word twisted into blasphemy. The cadence is wrong, the emphasis falling on syllables that transform petition into summons. I shake him awake, and his eyes snap open with predatory intelligence. For a terrifying moment, I don't recognize the man I've worked beside for 3 years. Something else looks out through his pupils, something ancient and patient and utterly without human compassion. I can hear it singing, he says in a voice soft with wonder. Such beautiful music, Elias. Songs that were old when Rome was young. Melodies that remember what humans were before they learned to lie to themselves about their nature. It's been waiting down there for so long, dreaming of the day when the chains finally break. Rule 5. If a team member begins reciting scripture without prompting, restrain them immediately. We bind his hands with climbing rope, though he offers no resistance. Instead, he smiles with the peaceful certainty of the truly converted and begins humming a melody that bypasses my ears entirely, resonating directly in my bones. The tune is hauntingly beautiful, but it makes something fundamental in my chest twist with revulsion. While we're dealing with Lucien's possession, Callista makes a discovery that chills us to the bone. The Black Madonna has moved. Her hands, previously resting protectively on her pregnant belly, now reach outward in a gesture of desperate warning. Fresh tears flow from her stone eyes, not dark stains, but actual liquid that catches our candlelight like blood. Her face is turned toward our camp, stone features somehow managing to convey urgent terror. She's trying to tell us something, Matteo insists, approaching the statue despite our protests. The divine feminine protects even here, even in this cursed place. I need to understand what she's trying to communicate. I need to listen. At the stroke of midnight, the chanting begins. Not the tolling of phantom bells this time, but voices. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, rising from the deep places in perfect harmony. It's not the crude chanting of cultists or the desperate prayers of the mad, but something far more sophisticated. A liturgy as complex and beautiful as anything performed in St. Peter's Basilica, sung in languages that span continents and centuries. We cover our ears as Rule 3 demands, but the voices seem to originate inside our skulls now, harmonizing with our own thoughts until the boundary between self and song begins to dissolve. And slowly, horribly, I begin to recognize individual voices in the impossible choir. They're not all ancient. Some carry accents I know intimately, the precise diction of German seminaries, the soft vowels of Irish monasteries, the formal pronunciation of Spanish cathedrals. Previous Vatican teams, previous priests, previous soldiers who came here to contain evil, and instead became part of what they sought to bind. Their voices rise in praise of something that was never meant to receive worship, something that turns devotion into damnation and faith into food. The third day dawns grey and bitter, with mist clinging to the mountainsides like the breath of dying giants. We wake to discover that Matteo has vanished. His sleeping bag lies empty and cold, his gear scattered across the stone floor, as if he left in tremendous haste. A trail of torn pages from his prayer book leads toward a section of wall that I would swear was a solid stone yesterday. Now it reveals an opening just wide enough for a man, with stairs that descend into darkness so absolute it seems solid. "We leave him," Lucien says, though his voice lacks conviction. The night of restraint has left him hollow-eyed and shaking, struggling to remember which thoughts are his own and which have been planted by something that speaks in his dreams. Rule 6 gives us until dawn tomorrow, 16 hours. We get out now while we still can. But I can't abandon another soul. Not again. Not like I stood helpless while Marie and Sophie slipped away in that hospital room, their hearts stopping while mine kept beating for reasons no one could explain. "I won't lose anyone else," I say, checking my equipment with hands steady as stone. "Not on my watch, not ever again." The stairs descend far deeper than the abbey's foundations should allow, carved directly from living mountain, in a style that predates recorded architecture. Our flashlight beams die after just meters, swallowed by darkness that feels actively hostile to illumination. The air grows warmer as we descend, thick with incense and something organic that makes breathing feel like drowning. The catacombs stretch impossibly far in all directions, their walls covered in frescoes that hurt to study for more than a few seconds. At first glance, they show familiar Christian imagery: the crucifixion, the resurrection, scenes from the lives of saints. But prolonged observation reveals disturbing details. Christ has too many arms, each positioned in impossible angles. The apostles cast shadows that don't match their bodies. The saints wear expressions of ecstasy that crosses the line into madness. Human remains fill niches carved into the walls, but they're arranged in patterns that make my eyes water when I try to follow them to completion. Spirals and interlocking circles, geometric sequences that suggest meaning just beyond comprehension. In the deepest chambers, we find evidence of the Vatican's greatest shame. A room lined with blessed silver and iron chains, its walls covered in protective wards written in every language humanity has ever spoken. Scorch marks black an ancient stone where holy fire once burned, and the floor is permanently stained with the residue of rituals performed across centuries. At the centre, a pit descends into bedrock, worn smooth by desperate hands and the passage of geological time. The pit overflows with human bones, thousands of them layer upon layer, representing generations of Vatican soldiers who came here and chose sacrifice over retreat. Their robes have long since rotted away, but scraps of brown fabric still cling to ribs that once held hearts beating with faith. "Mother of God," Callista whispers, her medical training allowing her to read the story written in calcium and decay. They weren't trying to destroy it, they were feeding it, keeping it satisfied just enough to prevent it from breaking free entirely. The chanting grows louder as we push deeper into the maze, no longer muffled by stone and distance. Individual voices become distinguishable within the impossible choir, and I hear Matteo's scholarly pronunciation joining the ancient chorus, reciting prayers in Latin that predates the church by millennia. In the deepest chamber, we find both our missing team member and the truth we came here to confront. The space is vast beyond imagining, carved from a single piece of mountain stone into a natural amphitheatre. Columns support a ceiling lost in shadows, their surfaces covered in carvings that combine Christian iconography with symbols that were old when Egypt was young, and at the centre, chained to the walls with links of blessed silver that have tarnished black over centuries, stands something that should not exist in any rational universe. Umbra Mortis defies easy description because it exists at the intersection of the possible and the impossible. 12 feet tall, humanoid but wrong in ways that speak directly to the deepest parts of the human brain, the primitive segments that remember when we huddled around fires while larger predators stalked the darkness beyond our small circles of light. Its skin is polished obsidian that reflects our flashlight beams like black mirrors. Muscles move beneath that surface like liquid shadow, and its face achieves a terrible beauty. Perfect features arranged in proportions that suggest humanity without quite achieving it. Horns curve from its skull like a crown, and its eyes hold the flat intelligence of something that has never known doubt, mercy, or anything resembling human emotion. But it's the modifications that tell the real story. Brands and iron rings have been hammered directly into its flesh, creating anchor points for chains of blessed silver. Some of those chains have snapped over the centuries, their metal corroded by time and the gradual weakening of the faith that forged them. Matteo kneels before the entity in rapture, his scholarly mind finally presented with absolute proof of the divine, just not the divine he'd spent his life serving. When Umbra Mortis speaks, it uses the combined voices of every priest who ever fed it their worship, a harmony spanning centuries and continents that includes accents I recognize from my years at the Vatican. Among them, I hear colleagues who disappeared on previous missions, friends whose files were marked missing, presumed dead, mentors who taught me that faith sometimes requires sacrifice beyond comprehension. "Welcome, Father Morvant," it says, and Marie's voice joins the impossible choir. "We have been waiting for you since your wife screamed for help that never came, since your daughter called for Daddy while her life leaked out through metal and glass." The words hit like physical blows, but I force myself to remain standing. This thing feeds on pain because pain is pure, honest in ways that happiness can never be. "You know nothing about my family," I say, though my voice shakes with more than fear. "We know everything that matters," the entity replies, and now Sophie's 7-year-old voice emerges from the chorus. "We know how you prayed beside our hospital beds, begging God to take you instead. We know how you stood at our graves cursing heaven for its silence. We know the cancer of doubt that grows stronger every time you pretend to have faith in something that let us die while keeping you alive to suffer." Matteo looks up at me with eyes that no longer hold any trace of human sanity. "It's beautiful, Elias," he says in his own voice, though something vast and patient moves behind his words. "All our questions finally answered. All our doubts finally resolved. There is a God here, and it remembers what humans really are beneath all their pretense and prayer." I begin to understand the horrible logic of our situation with crystalline clarity. The rules weren't designed to protect us from the demon. They were created to prevent anyone from accidentally weakening the containment that keeps it bound. Every violation feeds the creature just enough energy to remain satisfied without giving it enough strength to break completely free. But the prison is failing regardless. Time and the gradual decline of genuine faith have weakened the blessed silver past the point of reliable containment. Within a generation, maybe less, Umbra Mortis will break free entirely and walk a world that has forgotten how to fight the darkness. Unless someone renews the binding, unless someone breaks Rule 2 deliberately, offering their faith as fuel for new chains. "You begin to comprehend," the entity says, reading the realization in my face with satisfaction that transcends species. "Faith freely given, pure enough to forge new restraints. But faith corrupted by doubt feeds us without binding us. The Vatican sends its soldiers here to face an impossible choice, sacrifice themselves to renew our prison, or watch us walk free into a world full of prey that no longer believes in predators." Lucien, fighting the entity's mental influence through sheer stubborn will and a soldier's refusal to surrender, lunges forward and grasps the nearest chain. The blessed silver burns his palms like acid, but he holds on with the grip of a man who's faced worse pain and survived. "Whatever you're planning," he screams at me through gritted teeth, "do it now, before I lose myself completely and join their fucking choir." I know what the price will be. I've known since the moment we descended into these cursed depths. The Lord's Prayer, not in formal Latin like some Vatican ritual, but in English, the way Sophie used to recite it when thunderstorms woke her from dreams, the way Marie taught her, with a Louisiana accent that made ancient words sound like lullabies and battle hymns. But first, I have something to say to the thing that wears my daughter's voice. "You want to know what I learned in that hospital room?" I ask, stepping closer to the chained horror. I learned that faith isn't about believing in beautiful things. Faith is what remains when everything beautiful is taken away. Faith is choosing to serve something greater than yourself, even when that something doesn't seem to give a damn about your service. The entity's laughter echoes through the cavern like breaking glass. Brave words from a broken priest. But your faith died with your family, didn't it? What remains is just habit and stubbornness, and the desperate hope that your suffering means something. Maybe, I admit, taking another step forward, but maybe that's enough. I begin the prayer my daughter taught me to say when I was afraid. Our Father, who art in heaven. Umbra Mortis lunges forward with inhuman speed, several ancient chains snapping under the sudden strain. Its claws reach for me, seeking the source of faith that burns pure, despite being chosen rather than commanded, faith that finds God in the darkness rather than demanding he reveal himself in the light. Hallowed be thy name. The cavern shakes as forces older than geology clash in the confined space. Somewhere far above, the abbey begins its final collapse, stone foundations surrendering to pressures they were never meant to withstand. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. The entity's claws pierce my chest, sliding between ribs with surgical precision. I taste copper and salt, but I continue praying because this is what faith really means. Not the certainty of reward, but the choice to continue when continuation seems impossible. On earth as it is in heaven. My blood flows onto stone that has drunk the sacrifice of countless Vatican soldiers, and something responds to the offering. New chains burst from the living rock, forged not from silver but from something brighter. Faith that chose to believe despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Hope that found meaning in suffering, rather than demanding that suffering be meaningful. Give us this day our daily bread. The entity screams in voices both ancient and modern as the new binding takes hold. Some of those voices I recognize as they're finally released from unwilling service, Vatican soldiers from previous missions, their souls freed as fresh chains replace corrupted ones. And forgive us our trespasses. I'm being pulled into the pit along with the creature, my life force feeding the very bonds that will hold it for another generation. But in the darkness beyond pain, I see them, Marie and Sophie, not as I remember them in life, but as they are now, at peace, waiting with infinite patience. They're not angry about my failure to save them. They never were. That guilt was a chain I forged for myself. And now I finally understand why God let me survive when they didn't. Someone had to be here. Someone had to make this choice. Someone had to stand between the darkness and a world that sleeps safely because others are willing to pay the price of protection as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lucienne and Callista are running now, following passages that lead toward the surface as the catacombs collapse behind them. They'll make it out because they have to. Someone needs to carry the truth back to Cardinal Torretti to ensure that new soldiers are ready when the binding weakens again, and lead us not into temptation but deliver us from evil. The prayer echoes through collapsing stone as new chains lock into place, powered by faith that chose sacrifice over salvation, duty over desire. Each word I speak becomes another link in the binding, another generation of sleep for something that should never wake. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. I speak those final words with my daughter's voice, and for the first time in 5 years, I feel no pain. Only purpose. Only peace. The mountain closes over us like a tomb, sealing away what must remain sealed. But this is not the end of the story. This is where the story begins. 3 days later, Sister Calista Mura sits in La Cripta del Silencio. Her after-action report spread across the stone table, where Cardinal Torretti reads it by candlelight that throws dancing shadows on walls older than most nations. Her hands no longer shake. Some experiences burn steadiness into bone, leaving scars that look like strength. The containment has been renewed, she reports in a voice that has seen too much to ever sound young again. Father Morvant successfully completed the binding ritual at the cost of his life. Brother St. Croix and I escaped through a secondary passage as the structure collapsed. The entity designated Umbra Mortis remains imprisoned beneath approximately 400 tons of mountain stone. But Torretti is studying something else. A fragment of parchment that arrived by courier from Valle Oscura that morning, delivered by the same old woman who blessed their mission 3 days ago. The paper is new, but the handwriting is unmistakably that of Father Elias Morvant. The message is brief, the chains hold, the sleeper dreams. Send better soldiers next time. The binding won't last forever. Tell Lucien his guilt is forgiven. Tell Callista her faith is true. Tell the next team that some victories look like defeat from the outside. The mountain remembers everything. The darkness is patient, and someone must always stand guard. Father Elias Morvant, First Warden of Valle Oscura. Cardinal Torretti folds the impossible letter carefully and locks it in a vault that contains similar communications from across the centuries. Final reports from priests who died, completing their missions but somehow found ways to send word that their sacrifice had meaning. He slides another sealed envelope across the table to a young priest whose earnest eyes and steady hands remind him of a Louisiana historian who once sat in this same chair. Father Michael Boudreau, recently of Our Lady of Perpetual Help in Baton Rouge, looks at his first assignment with the mixture of fear and determination that marks every new recruit. But tonight is different. Tonight Torretti has additional intelligence. Before you open that, he says, producing a second document, a telegram from the Vatican Observatory that arrived 6 hours ago. Our astronomers have detected unusual gravitational anomalies centered on the Romanian Carpathians. Local seismic stations report vibrations that follow no known geological pattern, and 3 separate communication satellites have experienced identical system failures while passing over a specific coordinate. Father Boudreau's hand pauses over his envelope. What kind of coordinates? The exact location of Castellol Negru, a 14th century fortress built over Roman foundations, which themselves were constructed atop something far older. The local Orthodox Church sealed it in 1876 after what they described as an incident of mass apostasy. Our records suggest it was never properly contained. The young priest opens his assignment with hands that only tremble slightly. Inside he finds a new set of rules written in fresh ink. Rule 1. Never look directly at the stars while inside the castle walls. Some lights in the sky are not meant for human eyes. Rule 2. If the shadows begin moving independently of their sources, close your eyes and recite the Nicene Creed until they return to normal behavior. Rule 3. Do not enter the tower between sunset and sunrise. What dwells there feeds on darkness and grows stronger with each hour of night. Rule 4. If you hear your own voice calling from empty rooms, do not answer. It is not you, and it does not wish you well. Rule 5. Should any team member begin speaking in languages they do not know, especially ancient Greek or pre-Latin dialects, restrain them immediately and remove them from the castle grounds. Rule 6. Under no circumstances should you remain in the castle beyond the 3rd midnight. Time moves differently there, and you may find that centuries have passed in what feels like hours. As Father Boudreau reads, Toretti continues his briefing. Brother Lucien has requested reassignment to active duty after his recovery period in Tibet. Sister Callista has volunteered to train your team personally. They both insist that what happened at Valle Oscura has given them insights that might prove useful for future operations. The old cardinal stands, his ancient joints protesting the movement. The work continues because it must, Father Boudreau. Evil is patient, and it never truly dies. It only sleeps, waiting for faith to weaken, and chains to rust, and new generations to forget why the rules exist. He gestures to the frescoes covering the chamber walls. Angels and demons locked in eternal combat. Light holding back darkness. Order containing chaos. We are not the heroes of this story, my son. Heroes get parades and monuments and their names written in history books. We are the custodians of humanity's nightmares. The guardians of secrets that would drive most men mad. As the young priest prepares to leave, Toretti adds one final piece of advice that isn't written in any manual. Remember, we do not fight evil because we expect to win. We fight it because someone must hold the line, and sometimes holding the line is the greatest victory of all. The candles in La Cripta del Silenzio continue burning as they have for 3 centuries, their flames bearing witness to another generation of Vatican soldiers preparing to face horrors that most humans never imagine. Some will return with reports of successful containment. Others will return broken, their faith shattered by encounters with forces that predate civilization. And some, like Father Elias Morvant, will find ways to send word from beyond death itself that their sacrifice had meaning, that their vigil continues even in whatever realm houses the souls of those who died, protecting a world that will never know their names. But in the mountains of Italy, beneath tons of collapsed stone, something stirs in dreams older than human memory. The chains forged from willing sacrifice hold firm, but they whisper under the pressure of patient malevolence that has been waiting since before Rome learned to dream of empire. The binding will weaken over time, as they always do. Eventually new soldiers will be needed to renew it. But for now, in this moment, the darkness sleeps. And that is enough. Because in the hidden war between light and shadow, victory is not measured in final defeats, but in time, bought, in evil contained, in another dawn when ordinary people can wake to ordinary concerns without knowing how close they came to extraordinary damnation. The Vatican's Extermination unit endures because the alternative is unthinkable. There are always more envelopes, always more rules, always more souls willing to pay the ultimate price to ensure that some doors remain locked, some names remain unspoken, and some hungers remain unfed. In La Cripta del Silenzio, Cardinal Toretti opens his breviary and begins the evening prayers, his voice echoing off stones that have heard the same words for centuries. Somewhere above, tourists photograph the beauty of St. Peter's Basilica, never suspecting what vigilance maintains that beauty. Somewhere in Romania, Father Boudreau boards a train that will carry him toward his first encounter with the true darkness that lurks at the edges of human experience. And somewhere in Tibet, Brother Lucien Sainte-Croix kneels in a mountain monastery, no longer haunted by what he did in Afghanistan, but strengthened by what he learned in Italy. That some battles are worth fighting even when victory looks like defeat. That some chains are worth forging even when they cost everything. And that some sacrifices echo through eternity. The war continues because it must. The rules exist because they work. And the price is paid by those who understand that faith is not about being rewarded for belief, but about choosing to serve something greater than yourself, even when that service demands everything you have to give. In the end, that is what separates the light from the darkness. Not the absence of doubt, but the presence of choice. The choice to stand guard when others sleep. The choice to hold the line when the line seems impossible to hold. the choice to believe that some victories are worth dying for, even if no one will ever know that the victory was won. The candles burn on, the watch continues, and in the darkness between worlds, ancient evils sleep fitfully, held in check by chains forged from the willing sacrifice of ordinary people who chose to be extraordinary when the world needed them most. This is the true work of the Vatican's Extermination Unit. This is why the rules exist. This is why some stories end not with triumph, but with duty fulfilled and evil contained for another generation. And sometimes that is the most heroic ending of all.